Hello, hi, welcome to Unitary designation. Today I wanted to talk about virtual reality. Now, in my first video, the general outlines of the theory of virtual worlds, I outlined a lot of the points that I will be talking about in general. One of the points were virtual worlds, virtual reality. VR is what we might today think of as VR is these Oculus headsets or these different kinds of headsets, and the the digitally rendered virtual worlds that you're sort of enclosed in, auditory, visual, and to some degree somatic stimuli, right? And that's basically what, when people say VR, that's essentially what they mean. There's many virtual worlds that aren't necessarily captured by that specific type of technological patent or medium, but my concern isn't to demarcate them. That's not the point of the video. The philosophical underpinnings of VR is more what interests me. There's been a fair bit of scholarly focus on VR, especially in the media domains, not so much in formal philosophy. Part of the reason why this hasn't been, there are some books and some philosophers that are doing a lot with the phenomenology of VR and perception, and some thinkers are talking about using virtual worlds. Let me actually get that book. Virtual Worlds as Philosophical Tools by Stefano Guarlini. Hope I'm saying that right. The key questions he posits are: what does it mean for human beings to be in simulated worlds? Will experiencing worlds that are not actual change our ways of structuring thought? Can virtual worlds open up new possibilities to philosophize? These are great questions. So there are some rudimentary work that is, or some introductory work that is being done. But if you could go back in time, that book is just one example. If you could go back in time to like ancient Greece, Athens, and show Aristotle a VR headset, like plug him in and have him watch VR chat, the history of Western philosophy would look different. And Plato would be like, I told you, ideal realms. Probably wouldn't be exactly like that, but you get the gist. And it's just... Okay, I'm going to make a short segue through existentialism. Martin Heidegger, the German existential philosopher, wanted to go back to the time of the Greeks to readdress a certain issue. He wanted to bring the Western philosophical canon out of its current, not rot, but its current path, and then take it back to the time of the Greeks and do a new sort of philosophical enterprise. And many people, other philosophers, have also made the point that Western philosophy are merely footnotes to Plato. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it's a good enough point. There hasn't been radical rethinking. We've mostly expanded upon the intellectual framework established by the Greeks. And I don't think that's necessarily purely arbitrary either. I think there's a reason why democracy is our current system of government. It's not just because the Greeks happened to invent one of many arbitrary ways of running things and we just we just follow that one for no reason. If you hit on truths, then you hit on truths. But philosophy is slightly different than philosophical systems because the environment, the solutions you implement are more, well, they're more personal, first of all. Political solutions, like, I don't know, taxing. You don't need a new, once you have established a theory of taxation, you don't need to reinvent another theory of, like, you don't then need, okay, well, it's year 14 now, BC, AC, yeah, and AD, sorry, it always confuses me. Yeah, it's the year 14 AD. We used taxation last year, so now we need a new system to distribute. You get the point. Like, once a political solution or structure has been implemented, you don't need to reinvent it. But for philosophy, there's, like, you have different individual lives, so you always need to, like, your life is different from mine, and the philosophies that guide and structure my existence aren't necessarily applicable to you. So you need something that can help you manifest your, well, whatever aims or goals, or even if you're just questioning whether or not you should have aims or goals, like whatever you're using philosophy for, it's up to you. So you need a bigger variety of it. And in that sense, going for Heidegger, going back to Athens makes sense, right? Because sometimes when you want to think really new, you have to go back to baselines. So the reason why I bring all this up is we need something similar when it comes to virtual reality. The current philosophical sort of take on VR is like, I'm not an expert on it, and, you know, I would love for people to correct me here, but it seems lacking when you consider the magnitude of what a virtual reality actually is. Like, you can either sort of like just offshoot it as like, oh, VR, that's just a modern rendition of the brain in the vat experiment. What if everything was simulated? Like, whoa, right? VR could be like just a, you know, it's not, if that is the only philosophical implication you think VR has, just being a revamp of brain in the vat, then I think you'd be missing the point. Virtual realms are something so fundamentally different. Like digitally rendered virtual worlds, especially digitally rendered virtual worlds that appeal to us. I mean, these evoke deep questions. Why do we not feel at home on the earth, right? Why do we feel alienated? Why do we feel alone and atomized and separated from a whole and from unity? And why do we feel the need for social connections? Why do we establish long-term partnerships even when they drive us mad, right? Why do we have this feeling of separation if we're supposed to be beings of this world, right? And how come virtual worlds, when we put them on these headsets, how come they're so intuitive to us? I mean, I know they've been tailored by design, conscious design, to be intuitional, but how come we can intuit worlds? Like, we already know when we see a digital space, like a room, a digital room in VR chat, we sort of know how to intuit that as sort of like, sorry, it's totally irrelevant. Yeah, we sort of know to intuit that. Sorry, I'm just gonna bring up a picture of VR chat. What it looks like. There we go. And like this, and then like that. Like, this is the experience that people see when they see a VR chat. They see like a sort of digital room and a sort of, yeah, like avatars walking around. They see all forms of like things that are real world like, but clearly not reality, right? Digital spaces. But we still intuit meaning and construct navigational ways to walk through and like get something meaningful, play constructive, meaningful games out of it. And we sort of just intuitively know how to do that in a new space without our bodies. Like, there's just so many philosophical implications about that you can imagine an alternate timeline, right? An alternate world there where VR technology was developed and then everyone lost their fucking minds, right? You can envision such a scenario. And philosophers across the world just dropped everything they were doing in formal language and ethics and politics and aesthetics and all these different subdomains, and they just all just started thinking about how can we sort of like combining metaphysics with technology and VR chat, but it's just mostly like alternative, alt groups on the internet, French communities, and no disrespect to them. I happen to think they're lovely people, but they're not exactly like mainstream philosophers talking about. There are mainstream philosophers talking about VR, but it's not the intellectual topic of the 21st century. It's not even top 5. So it's like, I think one of the reasons. So I wanted to ask the question: why isn't it bigger? Like, why isn't it sort of like? Why hasn't it shook the foundations of Western civil or human civilization? That we can make worlds that we just feel almost as home in as we do here. Some people spend more time in virtual worlds than they do in their own. And some of the systems that we're able to design in online communities, either they be games or trading or anything, they appeal more to your. There's more opportunity to express your competencies online or in these online worlds, and less competition for them. So people naturally gravitate towards areas where they can show off their personality and their competence. So like, maybe you suck at life, and one of the reasons you suck at life is because you're very high in negative emotion, but you're also very high in the need for. Like, you have a high performance need. You have a high social need for, what is it? There's 3 implicit in psychology. There's 3 social needs, implicit needs. They're socialized into you. They're the needs for performance, relations, and power. And so maybe you have a high socially acquired need for relations, and or achievement, and you're also high in negative emotions, so you're predisposed to not being able to compete in an actual marketplace where people actually fight tooth, claw, and nail for like survival resources, right? Job, like, but in a virtual world where there isn't this sort of, I need to be good at operating this crane to eat, maybe you, with your predisposed higher neuroticism, can freely express some more creative aspects. And maybe you would like to monetize that, right? Maybe you would like to not be able, maybe you can't participate in the real world for any reason: health, personality, predispositions, interests, ability, IQ, whatever. Like, whatever reason you can't compete in the real world, maybe you would like to monetize your activity digitally. All these questions underlie, like, whatever you want to do, right? Economic, creative, personal, societal, like whatever area you want of human activity you want to manifest in the digital realm, they all underlie this central axiom of you can express your human nature digitally, like in the digital space. Like that axiom of like you're able to intuit it. It's so foundational for a whole new vista of human potential. Across the future time spans, there's gonna be digital world and after digital worlds. I'm almost certain of it. We've tamed the external world to such a degree that food and clothing and shelter and like agriculture and like domestication of animals, it's all pretty much taken care of. Right? Ignoring human psychology for a second. If your only goal was to generate the food and the clothes and the heat and the buildings you needed to feed 7 billion people, we got that, more or less. The fact that we are able to have 7 billion people means that we're able to have 7 billion people. Like there isn't like 6 billion and 1 billion starving and dying. No, there's 7 billion stable and growing. So we've been able to like master the environment to that degree. Now we need an environment to allow everyone's, I don't even know what it is. Like Maslow talked about self-realization. We need a space where that self-actualization process can unfold. And yeah, you could do that digitally. And yes, you could essentially try to monetize that. And people do creatively. That's what YouTube is. And that's what a lot of these entrepreneurs and social media knowledge workers are. They're not doing essential work for like food generation. I'm not arguing that they should be. But they're, in lieu of having tamed the real world to such a degree, and being tired of fighting with sociopaths for status symbols, I don't mean to imply that everyone who acquires status symbols or are driven to acquire status-related symbols are sociopathic. I am saying that the more you tend toward sociopathic or psychopathic personality traits, the more you are likely to define your safety and value and worth in terms of status symbols. But for everyone who isn't hyper concerned about owning a Porsche or a car, they need some other form of domain to express social competence or mastery in, or status. And that is these virtual worlds. So, anyways, I'm talking about why virtual worlds are relevant, right? And the reason why I'm talking about the relevance is because I want to highlight the gaping hole that is the lack of philosophy that is being taken to address these. We've just sort of like discovered VR worlds and VR chats and online games and their implications. And I would hate for philosophy to be left holding the bag. That this becomes, during the 2030s, 2040s, 2050s, this becomes the new economy. And then philosophy catches up and starts talking about the metaphysical implications of these ideal realms being created in technology. It seems like it's sort of the death of free ideas, because then you'd have the market economy driving the intellectual climate instead of the intellectual climate orienting the market. So, I don't know. I mean, philosophers are going to research what they find interesting. And the history of philosophy isn't exactly one of deep diving into the philosophy of technology. And I would love to have an academic philosopher on my podcast to talk about, like, why isn't... So I can almost predict that conversation already. I'm going to ask, why isn't it a bigger question in philosophy, the implications of VR? And then they're going to name drop 3 or 4 researchers that are working on it and show me 20 published articles, and I could probably use Google Scholar and find those. But that isn't my point. I'm not asking why hasn't anyone started thinking about this. I'm asking, why isn't it the only question that is relevant? It's sort of like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is in philosophy of science, there's the notion, Kuhn's notions of paradigm shifts, that people operate within an existing paradigm, and they do science relevant to that paradigm, like the Newtonian paradigm of gravity, like matter attracting matter. And then when that paradigm is superseded by the Einsteinian paradigm, where it's like it's not matter attracting matter, it's warps in space-time, that paradigm shift means that all the old science isn't directly relevant to the new paradigm, and there's a conflict and a war between the paradigms. And sometimes science progresses in funerals. The old paradigm just has to die out before new paradigm shifts can occur. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, or just not even ask, just highlight, is that there should have been, to my estimation anyways, you could argue that there should have been a similar kind of paradigm shift from a Earth-centered focus to a Copernican view of like the sun as the center. Like that was a paradigm shift. There should have been a similar philosophical level paradigm shift in our culture from like the 1900s to 2022 to like, wow, we exist largely in digital worlds now. Huh, fancy that. We now exist in essentially platonic realms. And it's just like, yeah, of course we do, yeah. And to be fair to philosophers, we've had a lot thrown at us. You know, world wars and atom bombs and philosophical wars of political redistribution. And, you know, we've had a lot thrown at us. And we haven't, contrary to my earlier claims, we haven't actually tamed the external world sufficiently. It's still very dark and dangerous. But I don't know. I guess my question is, why isn't this a bigger deal? Why is it only a fringe couple people on YouTube talking about VR? They're like a hobby, like people who have a hobby for that. It's like, yeah, I have a hobby for cars, you have a hobby for VR, whatever. We all have our games, and I think that's like saying, yeah, you think the world is flat, I think the world is round. We all have our games we play. It's like, no. The paradigm of virtual realms is so big, so like game-changing, foundationally game-changing, and it's going to prove game-changing for our economies, for our social systems, for our social status structures, for the way we do everything, from agriculture to art, that it's just. And if NFTs and cryptos are any indication, it's gonna, it's gonna blow a conceptual hole in the West, in humans, not just the West, China too, the East as well. Yeah, we might even have to go back to Hindu mythology and talk about like different realms of being, and the human realm being one of 7, or like old Viking mythology of Nordrasil. And yeah, we might have to dig really deep into our mythology to properly conceptualize what the virtual realms actually are. And I don't know if we have the tools, and I really don't think that treat it as a new technological thing, like a new iPhone thing. No, you need a way deeper analysis of your metaphysical assumptions if you want to come to terms with what virtual realms are. And I don't mean to sound like VR chat has blown a hole in our knowledge structure. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that as we more and more, like, at what point would you have to do these metaphysical reassumptions? When you're literally plugged into the Matrix? When you're actually going into your pod and being like, can't believe we upgraded from real life to synthetic life. Right? Is that the point where you have to be like, okay, let's reevaluate these? Like, let's think about the metaphysical implications. So I'm not an expert in metaphysics, and I'm not an expert in VR, and I'm not even, I'm barely a journeyman in philosophy. But I do think it's very interesting, the lack of attention this is getting. So either I'm wrong in my understanding of how deep the problem of virtual or digital or fictional, technologically mediated fictional worlds are, or I'm so like ahead of the time that it's, just this is going to be relevant in 2363. Like, don't think about it. Or some other thing. But I obviously I felt this was, I feel this is important. I'm making a video about it, so clearly it has relevance to me, and I think to us. So, okay. Takeaways. If you're an informed, sophisticated thinker, if you're a knowledge worker, if you're someone who works with ideas, what does VR mean for you? What does it signify for you? Well, it means that there's a place you can go to have Zoom meetings with your avatars in virtual worlds. You don't need a PowerPoint presentation. You can, the world that you're showing to your colleagues can be the PowerPoint. You don't need to have new PowerPoint technologies, like these systems that have ring-like structures that zoom in and out of each other, right? You don't have to have these new fancy slides. That's already superseded by this. You can the world can be your PowerPoint. You can show in real time visual representations of what you mean. So then the car crash would look like this, wham, and then the implications of that would look like this, crying family. You could just, the visual medium is so rich and so potent and satirizing and commercial. If you get people to live in VR, or just do their Facebooking in VR somehow, or some form of social networking in VR, meeting their grandma's avatar in sort of like a public idea marketplace in digital space, the advertising potentials are infinite. And if you have something like Google Glass, these sort of you wear some form of visual overlay display in real life, you don't need to put up posters on bus stops. You can just have ads holographically being coordinated to that pixel, to that position that would display on your HUD retina. So, and Neuralink and these sort of the implications for technology, they're so big. Just advertising in the real world is mind shattering for the economy. You could write 60 PhDs just on that alone. The territory here is so cognitively rich that I'm almost struggling to I'm struggling to find a coherent thread that will tie the implications of VR together into some kind of format that you can be VR is important because of this, it's important because of that. No, VR is important because of all the things it can be, will be, has been historically. We're so far behind on the implications of the technology that we need 50 years of philosophy research just to catch up to where it is today. So that's one of the cool things about it. The technology is going so fast that it's hard to keep up. I like that. I like that a lot, because it pushes the academic system. It throws it a hot curveball. It's like, okay, deal with this, and then the academic system either ignores it, which it might be doing, or it totally has a paradigm shift, and there's not a lot of paradigm shifts. Again, no criticisms of traditional philosophy. We need epistemologists. I would argue of 7 billion people, are 1 million of them philosophers or trained in philosophy? We need a lot more philosophers. We need a lot more people dedicating their cognitive machinery to conceptualizing and then framing the challenges that are being thrown at us. We don't need less philosophers. No, we need a lot more. That would be my take. But in a sense, that's a separate video, which I could make, probably should make. Why we need more philosophers. One last thing I want to point out before I leave you here is that the problem of why VR worlds are so intuitive for us. Now, I showed you. I don't want to show you a video of VR chat because it's not relevant. VR chat or World of Warcraft or Solitaire or Angry Birds or whatever digital game you're engaged in, the fact that we can create games that, I mean, just that you have a play circuit to begin with, that you can make games to activate is mind-blowing. Then you can put these games online for competition, which means you're engaged in another, like your nervous system is engaged with another nervous system through arbitrary rules that are mediated by a technology that give you both meaning and stimuli and like enjoyment. That's just like, so you can generate a game system that can give meaning and status to people. Like, how does that even work? How do you get a chimp to derive meaning from a digital space following rules that are arbitrary? Like, the rules of Solitaire are arbitrary, but people will engage and spend thousands of hours being the world Solitaire champion. And the rules of World of Warcraft are, well, they're not arbitrary. They're tied to how actual economies and actual status functions, but, you know, rarity times effort and all that stuff. But they're still digitally mediated. NFTs, people pour life savings into these like tokens, non-fungible tokens for like a pecking order for nothing. You can get people to invest meaning and value tokens into arbitrarily designed games mediated through a digital technology, which means essentially you can get people to do, think, and say whatever you want. You just need to create some form of like, you just need to tap into their intrinsic motivation, create a platform that stimulates that, and then advertisement, microtransactions. I hate that I have to tie all this to money to make it like, ooh, that's relevant, but whatever. Microtransactions or status that they can buy as proxy for something else. You know, I can sell my character in World of Warcraft for real money because he has the legendary items, and people will pay for that. You know, all this is to say that these the implications for all this are big, and I don't know how to conceptualize them or wrestle with them. What's interesting is that we just intuitively grasp them. The intuitive nature of it. It makes sense to us. Like a marketplace makes sense to us because we know, oh, I have a rabbit. They have two ducks. I want the ducks. He wants the rabbit. That makes sense to us because we understand trading. And a mountain makes sense to us. I can climb it. And a chair makes sense to us. I can sit on it. And a coffee cup makes sense to us. I can drink of it. But how does a virtual world make sense to us intuitively? It's never been in our environment. I know the virtual worlds are designed to simulate things that have been in our environment, chairs and walls and, you know, effect following cause and time and consistency and all that. But we still just put on the headset and then we're in that world. And whether you get nauseous or not, you're still in that world. What is it that feels itself as in that world? When you play a third-person game, like The Sims or something, not The Sims necessarily, but some form of action game, you identify with that character. You are then there on that screen. It's like you're seeing yourself through an out-of-body experience. What is it that is, like, if you're conceptually so unconnected to your body, what is it that is generating this sort of metacognition of like, yes, me as an agent just in the digital realm, me as an agent just in that economic forum, Me as an agent, just in this literary sense. Like, what is generating this me sense, and what is putting it in time, and how connected is it to the body if you can stimulate it outside of the body, and just all these, and it's already here. These aren't like implications that will have implications 500 years. They're already affecting the economy and the society now. So, like, we need more people like this. We need more people that grapples with the implications of technology. Just me talking and sharing right now on YouTube is like, that's unheard of. 100 years ago, you could watch this video in China, and assuming you speak English, my ideas can go from here to China in 60 seconds, and he can expand on it, or she can expand on it and send it to someone in Brazil, and that person can expand on it. And it's just like, all this is happening so fast. It's impossible to keep up. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's what the future was supposed to be about. It's like, yes, free sharing of information and ideas, which is why freedom of speech is so important, but we'll leave that aside. So this video has gone on long enough, I think. I think we've hit on a couple of good points. The implications of VR and why VR is important. And I've been saying this stuff to my friends for years, but I figured I might as well just put it in a video and put it up. So, yes, I'm done. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. I hope you're well. I hope you're using this technology to better your life, living a good life. Thank you for watching. Take care.